All right, guys, we have just an hour or just under an hour left. And then afterwards, we are going to go upstairs to the rooftop if you want to grab some of these beautiful people behind me to network. So, the last topic we will be discussing is unconventional career paths. So, before Alfie talks a bit about the topic, I actually have a question for him because he's actually quite the person for this topic. I've had a few people ask me now, what does Alfie do? And every time someone asks me, I myself can't really explain it. So I would like Alfie to actually explain a little bit about just your general career, where you started out and what the heck you're doing now.
This is a tough one. Um, so I guess my career was a little bit strange, and I think in some ways it's unconventional as it gets. So I think I'll go quick, but I'm going to start from high school time, especially because I I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I was, I had a little bit of a gift in arts, so I did fine arts, and I was pretty good at computers. IT was one of the only other things that I was passing. And then generally everything else I wasn't very good at. I'm also dyslexic, which doesn't help anything, especially if you want to be a computer programmer. There's a lot of semicolons that will stand between you and running code. Um, and so I eventually went into I studied at the University of Pretoria, and I pretty much from the beginning I knew it was a non-starter. I didn't have the academic capability to actually perform, but I was able to kind of see what the other people were studying. Then around my second attempt at second year, I had the privilege to do a job shadow opportunity at ABSA. Now, this is the one time where I will say sometimes free work can be useful, especially if you're taking an unconventional path, because you don't even know what you're worth. And sometimes the learnings are more valuable than any amount of money that somebody could give you. And so I spent a month job shadowing at ABSA in the design team, and it was right about that time. I don't know who's familiar with the whole African Acid campaign that ABSA did. So that was the time that I was actually job shadowing at ABSA, right before it had been announced, when they still had that squiggly logo and they were redoing their website. Now, I didn't actually do anything productive. They got me to do a couple of icons and so on, but I actually got to see what designers did. I got to see that all of the hours I'd spent playing computer games can very easily translate to Illustrator. And that was in the time where all websites were made in either Photoshop or Illustrator, like XD and Figma and all of these things didn't exist yet. And so that's where I saw for the first time that I didn't have to be a coder. I didn't need maths, I didn't need science. All I needed to do is make that canvas look beautiful. And if I could do that, there were people who would be willing to pay me. And now I did that in a sense. I probably paid to do that because I was using the Gautrain every day, and they weren't paying me, but I was getting this experience. And so I eventually dropped out of school and applied for all kinds of jobs. And like Chaz, I eventually came across this company called King James, um, and it was probably like number 60 in the list of companies that I called, emailed, because I mean I had no connections. I didn't know anyone working. Like yes, I'd done this job shadow, but because of regulation, my brother can't just get me a job. So I had to find another route. And so I called, emailed all of these people, and literally of the 60 that I sent emails out to, two responded. And the first one said, no, you need experience. And the second one said, yeah, sure, come in next week. And that was a Monday. I went in on the Monday to this interview in Joburg. Now, I grew up in Pretoria, knew nothing about Joburg. I think I'd been there like 4 or 5 times. And I go travel for 2 hours to get to this place that I know literally nothing about. And I come in for this interview, and I kind of had a little bit of a portfolio, but none of it was real client work. Some of it was case studies I did on the side. Others were like free logos I did for friends and family, as we've so adamantly been told is not the best way to go about it, which I agree with. But sometimes your only option isn't the best way. And so I kind of did that. I submitted my portfolio. I did this interview, and they said, like, how soon can you start? I know you're a student. You need to finish your degree. I was like, I can start next week. And I did. So I went, within the span of 2 weeks, I went from not knowing if I would ever be able to get a job to starting my first job. Simply because I was willing to ask everybody. And you just need that one person to say yes. And so that's how I started as a product designer. And I went into product design. I I realized that I would have to work harder than everybody else because I didn't have the evidence to prove that I could do this. And so my work needed to prove that for me. And so I practiced as a product designer. I, I've been in the industry for now about 6, 7 years, something like that. Um, and about 3 months back, I decided that I was going to leave this industry and all of this experience that I'd been gathering for 7 years to start my own business. And one of the reasons that I did that is because when I left the when I left the official education system, I realized that my education had become my own responsibility. And so I wanted to create something that would allow other people who can't go through a tertiary institution, who either for financial reasons, family reasons, location, or just not knowing what you wanted to do, give them a different route to move forward. And so the business that I'm focusing on at this moment focuses in three main areas. The first is in mentorship, which I think we've talked about. And I had the great pleasure to test out some of my earliest ideas in Jack Studios with their team and with a team that's doing real work with real problems. And I started to see that there was something useful there. And that faith that Sabia instilled in me sort of had its opportunity to grow a little bit. And so when I eventually left, I realized that I also had to focus on a broader market because this idea of peer mentorship doesn't have a place. Again, like me in my profession, like at the beginning of my professional career, my entrepreneurial journey started with no evidence, no qualification, just having an idea that I wanted to take to the world. And so, in some ways, even this session we're having today is an expression of what I'm trying to do from an entrepreneurial perspective. And that is bridge the gap between practicing professionals and students in training. And regardless of whether that's an app, whether that's just me having, 1 hour conversations with a team of 5 other designers in a different company, this is the mission that I've kind of been going on. And so this, in some way, is me telling you that I still don't necessarily know how to define what I do, other than the fact that it's chasing what I believe is good, what speaks to my creative instinct, and also what I think can actually provide some kind of value to the communities around me. And so I would say at this point in time, I would say I'm a little bit of a founder in its early stages, but one of the things that I'm finding is once I made the decision to let go of the product designer title that I'd been building up for 7 years, I could just now look at the skills that I have that I hadn't been able to express before, from loving to speaking up to people to hosting events like this, engaging with through the spoken word rather than visual elements. For the first time, I can actually think about these strengths in the context of the professional environment. And so I would say right now, the two roles I play is a founder, and I'm starting to develop this sort of role that you might say is almost a talent representative, similar to how you might have the agent for a musician. I'm starting to do something of that kind in the tech space. So finding people like those that you're seeing here in front of you and finding opportunities for them to actually grow who they are, but do so in a way that contributes to the wider community. And so that is, I guess, my 10 minutes of fame. And so maybe my way also to introduce this idea of unconventional career paths. And the reason that I wanted to talk about this is because I think my title right now doesn't really have a definition. Instead, it's sort of me just chasing an instinct that I think I have. And so I'd like you guys to really now start to think, you've sort of studied this discipline, and it's really built skills. I think the other funny thing, and one of the reasons why this is an interesting one for me is so I'm one of 4 boys, right? And so we all ended up in the tech space. 3 of us are designers and 1 of us is a software engineer. Well, he left software engineering to be a pro gamer. Um, but none of us studied it. I dropped out, so I've got no qualifications. My eldest brother did engineering, and he's now the head of design at ABSA. My other brother did human genetics and then microbiology. Now he's a customer experience designer. And it just shows you that the training of what you're doing now, it may not be the job title that you'll eventually pick up, but those skills are transferable. And Lauren mentioned this, Lo mentioned this. The skills you're developing now are developing you, and you are the person that's going to hold the title. And the title doesn't mean something because of the title. It means something because of what you do as you uphold it. And so I want to open the floor to allow some of our other speakers to share a little bit. And I think, please, just go for it.
Sure, dude. I think you touched on something that I think is quite important, right? Where you start or what you study may not be what you practice later on in life, right? But